And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hest here. And ladies and gentlemen, we are getting closer and closer to the AFLW season. So I thought, let's sit down and preview season 8 of the AFLW. And joining me today from the Soaring to New Heights podcast, a podcast about the Hawthorn women's team, which I think is fantastic. We have a women's specific podcast, is Liam from the podcast. Tim, the other member of the podcast, unfortunately could not make it today, but Liam, it is fantastic to have you on the podcast. Welcome for your first time and cannot wait to sit down and have a chat.
Likewise, Donny, thank you for having me on. Any chance I get to talk about the AFLW and several chances I don't really get and just force upon others, I will gladly take. So with just 15 days to go at the time of recording, let's get this party started.
I cannot wait. So I'm thinking let's go through and take a look at each of the teams. And I have to say this, Liam fantastically went through, did all the ins and outs. So I'm going to throw a lot to him a little bit. And then I have a question about each of the teams that I think we should discuss and kind of talk over it. And then we'll go through some of the normals that you get for the previews. Biggest jumper, biggest disappointment, who's going to make finals, who potentially could win the flag, and some stories that we want to keep an eye on. So let's jump right into it. Let's jump over to South Australia and Adelaide. So really quickly, Liam, who's come into the Crows lineup, who's out, and kind of what are your thoughts on this before we go with the question that I have for Adelaide?
So Denny Varnhagen returns after 2 seasons inactive. Jess Allen has been traded from the Giants after also having spent 2 seasons inactive. Sarah Goodwin's been traded in. Yvonne Bonner was drafted. She'll be an interesting pickup, I think, in the forward line, offering a bit of dynamism. Taylor Levy, I think is how you pronounce it, has come across as another sport rookie. She's a former basketballer. And then probably their recruit I'd be most excited about is 19-year-old midfielder Brooke Smith from the Dandenong Stingrays. She was absolutely flying as an overager for the Stingrays, and then was best on ground for the All-Stars in the AFLW Academy against the All-Stars game. She was unbelievable that day at Marvel, and she's come as an injury replacement for one of their inactive players. So out, Ailish Considine's been delisted. Ash St. Nee Woodland has gone to the Port Adelaide Power as a priority signing. Mariana Rajic has retired. Jasmine Simmons has been traded. And both Hannah Button and Mackenzie Dowrick are inactive through injury.
It'll be very, very interesting. The Crows are one of those teams that I keep an eye on. So my question for them is, and I'm really interested in one of your thoughts on this, is the dynasty over? I know they had several flags to start off early in their time period, and they were the team that everybody looked at. Is the dynasty over with some more players kind of leaving, with Rachich retiring, and Ash Saint finding her way over to Alberton and the Port Adelaide Power? So your thoughts, is the dynasty over? I mean, are the Crows the flag contender they used to be?
I mean, I think there's one team in a bit of a league of their own, to be honest, for me at the moment. That's Melbourne. We'll talk about them later. But I still think they're a top 4 side. They might be a third or fourth more, but but I look at their drawing and they've got the second hardest draw in the competition by opponent plus minus from last season. They, along with all the other big 4, being the other 3 being Melbourne, Brisbane, and North Melbourne, obviously they all play each other. So they've got 3 games against top 4 teams and then 2 other games against finalists. Although they also play 5 non-finalists, including Port Adelaide, in a round 1 showdown. And they don't actually play a big 4 side until round 6. They play one finals team, that being Richmond, in the first half of the season. So they've got a really but they'll be able to get some continuity and build themselves up a bit. I think they'll be fine. They've got a good home ground advantage over there in South Australia. They're still a really strong team. There's still a really strong culture there. And again, with that start to the season, they're going to be able to build up some continuity, build up some momentum. And they're really I think they're going to show themselves in the first half of the season that, yeah, we're still a good team here.
Yeah, I don't know if I would put them in the flag contender group, but I agree with you. I think they're a finals team. I think they're going to be tough, but I think they're losing some of that experience, and it'd be interesting to see how they go. I agree with you, Crows. I think preliminary final. I think is where they kind of, I think is kind of their ceiling a little bit. I don't know. Again, You just never know. I mean, injury, unfortunately, in the AFLW is a huge um it's a huge kind of situation you got to look at. Go, I mean, a couple of ACLs in just the right place, unfortunately. And again, I know it's a boogeyman in the AFLW. Um, Two ACLs could change a season. I mean, we look at Collingwood and how Brianna Davy and Britt Benici both went out in one season. So it'd be fascinating to keep an eye on the Crows again. I think they're going to be there when the whips are cracking. I just don't know if they've got enough to get to a grand final. It'll be fascinating to see how it goes, especially with, like I said, some key cogs like Mariana Rajcic now no longer playing, still with the club, and so we'll have to keep an eye on that. So we jump over to last year's runner-ups in the grand final, and that is Brisbane. And this team has seen a lot of ins and outs. I especially, I know you'll go through it, but I mean the easiest ones are their outs. Greta Bodie and Emily Bates both find their way onto your beloved Hawthorn Hawks,
Thank
which we will
you.
talk about on the positive side a little bit later. But real quick, Brisbane's ins and outs and kind of your quick thoughts on this Brisbane team.
So in addition to those two, they've also lost Jesse Wardlaw, who they traded to the Saints, Kate Lutkins, Luca Yoshida Martin, and Zimmerly Farquharson.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really hard name to pronounce. Those three are all inactive this season. Shani Webb has retired, and Lulu Puller has also been traded to North Melbourne. They've brought in Ellie Hampson from the Suns. Jennifer Dunn is an Irish rookie. Courtney Murphy is a rookie from basketball. Jade Prajelli is a listed free agent. That could be an interesting pickup. And Anela McMekey is an injury replacement, and Poppy Bolts has come from the draft. I look at all those outs, though. They've actually only lost 4 players who played in the grand final last year. Yes, they're 4 are probably their top 8 players, but it's not like they've lost. You look at that list of players. It's not like they've lost everyone from their grand final team. They've lost a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
players weren't in the side. Some of them were inactive. They've also listed 3 more players: Gabby Collingwood, Ava Seaton, and Maggie Harmer, who were all inactive already last year. So it's no net change. They've still got 2 open list spots. So I'll be curious to see what they do with them. But they've, Prajelli and Dunn will help offer a bit down back. Ellie Hampson is a shrewd signing who's going to be key in helping fill the Emily Bates sized hole in the midfield. You look at those losses, they still have a lot of talent. They've got Talia Hickey in the ruck.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon Campbell was best on ground in a losing grand final. Bree Conan and Nat Grider, that's 60% of defence, which is really strong. Orla O'Dwyer, Kathy Svark, and they've still got the league best and fairest winner and Ali Anderson going through the middle there. They've got
Mm-hmm.
Ruby Svark, they've got Dakota Davidson. They still have 4 players who have been all Australian on their books who are active this season. Nat Grider's been all Australian twice. Like, you say they've lost great players, and they have. The talent pathway in Queensland is ridiculous. The players they have there are superb. They are well coached. And at the end of the day, the gap between the top 2 and the rest of the competition last year was so vast that they may take half a step back, but it's not like they're going to be out of the top 4. I would struggle to see them out of the top 4.
Yeah,
I think,
complete.
I look at their draw, it ranks 8th for opponent plus minus last season. It's not like they've been handed a brutal draw again. They play 2 finals teams in addition to the rest of the big 4. They play 5 non-finals teams this season. So
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. This Brisbane team is one of those we get to see how that depth is. It's not that I don't think they're talented. I think they're very talented. I think they're very good. I just wonder how much of an impact on it. It's almost a psychological thing. Like, I don't think it's a talent wise. I don't think it's a depth wise, because of the fact that Queensland has been so good at producing young stars and young players. But it's almost a psychological thing. I mean, you lose two of your best midfielders, and your Coleman and your top goal kicker from last year and top goal kicker in the league. So I think that's actually kind of a perfect transition to my question: is, can the Lions reload after at least the 2 big losses in the midfield, 2 big losses with Greta Bodie and Emily Bates going to Hawthorn? Honestly, I'll answer the question first really quickly. I think they can, because I think, as I kind of said, their depth is there because of how good their academies have been going. But I think it's going to be a psychological. situation is that can they bounce back from it up between the years, because Starcevic knows that yes, he's got Ali Anderson, he's got Ruby Spark, he's got so many really good midfielders, he's got some really dangerous forwards, but are they going to be affected by the fact that three really talented players from last year's team now find themselves in different colors?
Honestly, I don't think so. Yeah, the forward line's taken a hit with Wardlaw, the finisher, and Bodie, the zippy player who links everything together in their front half, as well as Emily Bates, obviously being Emily Bates. But look, I look at their team. I listened to Nat Grider on Credit to the Girls during the Passing the Torch series, and they seem still so well connected, so focused. Like I'm not. There'll probably be a psychological impact a little bit, but I think they're well coached, they're well prepared. The culture there seems really strong. I struggle to see them dropping off too much, although I think they'll come back towards the pack a little bit, just with the loss of talent can't be completely overcome. But I can't personally see an issue with their headspace, especially with how well coached they are.
Yeah, and Starcevic will be really good. It's just we'll have to see. Come late, will there potentially be a falter, maybe a little bit later in games, just because you don't have those superstars? You never know. Again, I think Starcevic has done such a wonderful job. It's fascinating to watch this Brisbane team that, again, not a normal football state, being such a power when it comes to producing young women in the game, for sure. So we go from Brisbane to Carlton, a team that has been very, very frustrating for me, because I think if you look at the names, and again, I know names on piece of paper is not always one of those that you say is this is a good team. There's still some really good talent. There's some really great players donning the Blues Guernsey, even after some of the losses that they lost in the PSP, which you kind of felt for the Carlton fans a little bit, because they took a hit in this off season, losing Lucy McAvoy, making true and it, for another year, so a superstar finds themselves in different colors. I'm fascinated to see some of their new players that have come in via the trade. Harriet Cordner coming in. It'd be fascinating to see how that goes. So, really quick, your thoughts on their ins and outs, and just really quickly on the Blues here.
It's a long list of ins and outs. I don't actually know if I bother reading them all, but Nat Plain, Serena Gibbs, Brooke Walker are all big. They've lost Elise O'Day. Maddie Gearan, who didn't really play much last season, is now officially inactive this season. She did a knee very early last season. They've drafted 4 players, which this is probably, of all the drafts, you don't want to be drafting 4 players. No disrespect to the draftees this year. This is probably not the draft you want to be taking 4 players and building out 13% of your list from. Jen Lawson Taverns, an interesting pickup as a slightly undersized key defender. But yeah, Harriet Cordner and Talia Reid, as you've said, they've picked up 2 rookies from Ireland. If I'm completely honest, I think they're one of the worst teams in the competition this year, which is no knock on their players, but someone has to be down near the bottom of the ladder. I think they've got by far and away the easiest draw in the competition, which I think is the only reason I'm not picking them to win the wooden spoon, is because they've got by far and away the easiest draw in the competition by opponent plus minus from last season. But I think they might struggle, to be honest. I see talent in the front half, and I see bits and pieces of talent here and there. But there are bodies like Phoebe McWilliams, as good as she is, you can't trust her physically at the moment until you see her on the park in a more meaningful way. Again, Mimi Hill's a great player, doesn't turn 21 until after round 5. But she's their only remaining best and fairest on the list of a foundation club. Like, they've been in the competition 7 seasons. They've got one person on their list who has won a best and fairest.
Yeah, and unfortunately losing their coach, losing and moving on from coaches, so you got a brand new system coming in. So how are the growing pains of a new coach? Which I think is actually my question is that can a new coach change the fortunes of the Blues? Your thoughts on this one? Because again, as you kind of said, there's some talent, but unfortunately there's a few Swiss cheese holes here that I think could really make the Blues season quite long, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very long 10-round season, because the new coach will be great. They'll be able to get some new ideas. Carlton have been, to be honest, for a couple of seasons, looking like they're in need of a bit of a refresh and a reset. And fair play to them. They've committed to the rebuild. But I think Carlton, maybe not Lauren Young, but they're going to be hoping maybe Piper Window or Sinead Goodwin nominate national. A couple of South Australian talents.
Yep, and very, very good South Australian talents. I've been keeping an
Oh
eye
yeah.
on the AFLW this year, and they are absolutely electric players. But unfortunately, I have a feeling they may stay South Australia, which Port Adelaide has got to be licking their chops at some of this young talent, even Adelaide a little bit, some of the young talent coming out of SA. But
Well, if they
I,
if they, if they all nominate South Australia, Port Adelaide will get Lauren Young, who is just ridiculous. I watched the Vic
mm,
Metro against South Australia game,
mhm,
and I watched Lauren Young play football, and she could be a she could be a top five key forward in the competition in her first season. She
mhm.
is unbelievable. Sinead Goodwin, I think that's how you pronounce her name,
Sinead
and
Goody, Sinead
Sinead
Goody.
Goodwin,
Yep.
thank you, and Piper Window. They're saying those two ridiculous. You know, there's a couple of Metro players, Alyssa Pisano, and I'm a noted fan of Laura Stone's game. You know, those two are great as well. But the South
Hmm.
Australian talent this year, it's ridiculous. I think I saw on Rookie Mini Central, they had, I think, 5 of their top 10 prospects
Hmm.
were South Australian. And in a two-team town with a non-national draft, those two teams will just be very happy.
Yeah, Elaine Grigg is another one.
Yeah.
Absolutely electric pace. One of those really hard tackling small forward flanks that can go into the midfield if she really if when she wants to and give you that burst of speed. So it's fun watching the Sample W this year. There were so many 16 and 17-year-olds that I think are going to be fantastic AFLW players once they get drafted. So unfortunately, we got to get through this year before we start talking that draft. But I agree that the Blues are almost looking at it's like hopefully they can get to a draft where they can get at the top of the table, get some marquee talent in and kind of change their fortunes. Unfortunately, I agree with you. I think they're going to be bottom four, which will be fascinating to see how they go. So over to their bitter rivals normally, and that's Collingwood. And very interesting this because this is a Collingwood team. If you look at last year, this list took a change. This team probably was the one that yes, you looked at the last one, ins and outs for Carlton was good, but Collingwood's almost is a little bit longer because they've got some massive changes with some huge trades, moving out some experience, getting in some young talent. So ins and outs for Collingwood on this one, and your thoughts on this because wow, this is a different team than last year that's suiting up for the Pies.
Yeah. So I'll just to be clear, they had to get rid of a couple more players than they could bring in because of a couple of reasonable footballers returning from the inactive list, which I'll get to in a sec.
Mm-hmm.
Chloe Malloy has left to your Swans as a priority signing, of which I'm sure you're thrilled. Alison Downey's retired, and then they've traded out Jordan Membry, Steph Chiocci, and Jamie Lambert. I think those last two especially will be huge losses. Steph
Mm-hmm.
Chiocci, obviously such a crucial part of their forward line as a half forward, and also on the wing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie Lambert, just that gun midfielder, an all Australian. Like, you know, those kind of players don't grow on trees.
Mm-hmm.
However, speaking of players that don't grow on trees, tall midfielders who are league best and fairest winners, Bree Davey, not a bad player to be bringing back from the inactive list after 2 seasons away. Britt Benici,
Yeah.
the same. They've traded in Tani White, who's going to be a real good addition to their half back line or their midfield, depending on where they want to deploy her. Grace Campbell's coming in as well. They've drafted Ellery Morris and Selena Carlson with back-to-back picks 13 14 in the draft. And then Nell Morris Dalton is one who I'm really interested to see. She's an undersized key forward who couldn't quite crack a regular game at the Dogs. She's a very mobile key, probably a second tall forward. She's left-footed. Still only 22. She will need to hit the scoreboard more. Collingwood will be looking early in the season, like the Crows, I think. They're going to be looking for ways to score. Their talent up the ground is not going to be an issue. But Collingwood and Adelaide, I think Adelaide are probably just a better team overall slightly. But I'm going to lump them in the same category of they need to work out how they're going to hit the scoreboard in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
And Morris Dalton might be a crucial part of that as that mobile forward, but she will need to hit the scoreboard a bit more as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they fill the hole of Chloe Malloy because I think she was a linchpin that she could pitch hit in the midfield. I mean, she was almost the striker as I've heard in the men's game that one that could go into the midfield. They don't have to be a full-time midfielder because what they can do is start in the midfield and then shift with a half forward or half forward flank and then go forward and then be that dangerous because do they switch defensively? Does the midfielder follow her and then switch with a defender. So it caused some issues, and she was so good with ground balls that she made a lot of issues. Now Morris Dalton is not that. That's not her style. I think she's kind of gonna be that helper
Yeah.
to help out Sabrina Frederick up front, who I think, I mean, it would be interesting to see, do they try to deploy her more in the ruck this year now that Downey has retired? We'll have to see. I know it seemed like for a while Sabrina Frederick was having trouble getting around the ground a little bit the last couple of seasons. So whether she's going to stay permanent, almost a plug or lock it full forward out of the goal square, it'll be fascinating to see how it goes. Bree Davy, Britt Benici. I mean, like I said, getting two brand new all Australian type of players in your roster on your list this year will be absolutely fantastic. But can they make up for some of those losses? Again, Tarney White, I think, is a great addition as well. This is a Collingwood team that I look at, and they fascinate me because they could be extremely good if Bree, Britt, and Tarney all come in and make an impact. If Nell Morris Dalton makes an impact. If they do, Collingwood is going to be fascinating, which I think is the perfect transition to my question is, with some massive changes and some big guns back. Yes, you lose Lambert. Yes, you lose Jordan Membry. Yes, you lose Steph Kiochi. But then again, Britt Benici, Bree Davy, Tarney White all come in. Are the Pies a dark horse this year to potentially jump into that semi-preliminary final, top four, potentially grand final discussion?
It would take a lot to go right. I struggle to see them missing the finals. I actually think Grace Campbell is a player I'm really interested to see what she can do. She missed season 7 with injury,
Mm-hmm.
but I think she's had a lot of injury issues since she debuted in 2020. I think she's a really interesting player. Mid forward, 27, links the play well, will help cover the Chloe Malloy role a bit. I mean, you're not going to get Chloe Malloy from a trade realistically. You're just
Mm-hmm.
not going to get that. But she could help cover that role a bit, and other players can step up as well. Again, scoring's going to be an issue. I think a lot would need to go right for them to make a preliminary final. I think a lot would need to go right for anyone to crack into the top four other than the top four, frankly, the big three in North Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
But so the short answer, I guess, to that question from me is, can they? Yes. Will they? I don't think so, barring injuries to teams in that top four.
Yeah, I agree with you. It'll be fascinating to see how it goes. Again, Norse, one of those teams I'm very interested when we talk a little bit later, because their age profile on their list is getting a little bit older, and they took a hit. Vicky Wall deciding to stay in Ireland and go for the Olympics in 2024, I think is a big hit to them. They're still very talented, but I'm fascinated. We can talk a little bit more about North here in a little bit. But so we go from Collingwood now to, if I do my alphabetical order, should be Essendon. So Essendon was one of the 4 expansion teams last year. So last year's list had all additions and no subtraction. So it'll be very interesting to see how they go. So really quick, your thoughts on Essendon, because again, this was a team that, it'd be interesting. Brooke Brown was a priority signing from North Melbourne, and I think that's a great addition, because one of the things that Essendon struggled with last year was defense. They were great
Yeah.
going forward. They were great in the midfield, but their defense at times was very shaky.
Yeah, and Brooke Brown adds both size and run at 184 centimeters. Like, you don't realize with how well she runs the football, you don't realize how big she is as well, and can cover if you need her to, which you obviously don't want her to. That's not her role. But if she can cover bigger forwards if absolutely necessary. Other than Kat Phillips being inactive due to pregnancy, they haven't lost anyone they didn't delist. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they delisted all the players they've lost. Cody Jacques is a handy addition. Brooke Walker's a great addition. Matilda Dyke's a handy replacement signing. And the one that gets a little bit of attention and should be in every single person's AFLW fantasy team is Georgia Nanscoin.
Mm-hmm.
She's a tough in and under midfielder, really good player, dominant in the VFLW for a number of years before they've picked her up. She 100%, I think, is going to play. She's going to be a massive addition to their midfield. She'll help free up Maddie Prasparkas. And when I watched them in round 1 against us, especially, Maddie Prasparkas last season was the difference between the teams in round 1 last year. Like, that was the game right there. They
Mm-hmm.
had Maddie Prasparkas, we didn't. As a Hawthorn fan, that was the difference between the sides. They've had a bit of turnover, but again, it's no one they didn't delist. They've bolstered their back line. They've added a bit to their forward line. Cody Jacques will be there, desperate for opportunity. So she's at the very least going to add pressure for spots. Yeah, I do think they'll remain of the four latest expansion times, and it hurts me to say this because I can't stand this organization. I do think they'll remain the best of the four expansion teams this season.
Uh, it's who they signed the first year. I think is going to give them a leg up because I mean Matty Prasparkas, Georgia G. I mean instantly right there. Those two are two of the best that moved in that first year. And I'm totally brain farting. Forward from the Western
Too good.
Bulldogs. Yep, Bonnie Too Good. You would think I would remember that name because I always joke that whenever she did really well, she was just too good. Just that's her nickname. Her nickname should just be just too good. So, but unfortunately, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Again, another year as a group. So you think that you will see more synergy between the group. So I look at it here is for Essendon is the best of the expansion sides from last year. Will they have a second year slump? And I agree with you. I don't think so. I honestly think they are pushing the bottom part of the eight to potentially make finals. The issue will be is can Brooke Brown help kind of improve last year's defense that again had issues occasionally back there because there was so much talent going forward that they were kind of a little thin when it came to talent, I would think, and the defensive side. Brooke Brown is an addition. Is it going to completely change their defensive woes? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's going to completely change it. So I still think Essendon, when they play the top sides, the final sides, I think they're going to struggle a little bit because they can dominate teams that they're better than. But when it comes to teams that are even with them or better than them, then they may struggle a little bit. But I think Essendon is right in that not 8, 9, 10 bracket. I think it's going to be fascinating. The Richmonds, the Geelongs, the Essendons, the GWSs potentially if Fremantle sees a bounce back, it'll be fascinating to see. But this is an Essendon team. I think they're going to be fighting for finals this year. Do they make it? We'll have to see a little bit later with who makes finals with our tipping. So your thoughts on Essendon? Do they have a second year slump?
No, if I can make, unfortunately, no, they don't. If I can just make one comment, actually, I've got their draw up in front. I've got a spreadsheet which I think I've sent to you,
Yep.
ranking every team's draw by opponent plus minus. Their draw ranks as the 15th hardest. It is one of the easiest draws in the competition. They play the Crows, the only preliminary finalists they play. Then they play the Pies. Just quickly matching up numbers here. They play the Cats. And then 104, they play the Tigers. So they play one preliminary finalist and then three other finals teams. They have 6 games against teams that didn't make the finals last year, including games against the Eagles, the Hawks. Like they have 6 games where I think they will go into the game as categorically the better side.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe with the exception of Freo, actually, just looking at that, the Fremantle team could be interesting.
Yeah,
But
Fremantle is one of those I cannot. They'll be next actually, but I cannot wait to talk about them because they're going to be fascinating. New coach, new system. Much of the issues that they had last year, we'll see if they were addressed. But I almost look at this Essendon team and I go, and I agree with your draw, but it's a little bit of going off statistics last year. Like I understand, but I think Hawthorne's going to be much more talented than last year. So I think that isn't one of those where I go, and they were really close last year. And you add Emily Bates, you add Greta Bodie to that list. It's an even. I think it's an even now, especially in the midfield. So that Essendon Hawthorne game is going to be absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait for that game this year. Sydney, don't sleep on them either. I think they're going to be that pesky team. They're probably going to be a bottom 4 side, but they're going to be pesky as heck because with the additions that they brought in, they really used the PSP signing period to perfection for me because they brought in 2 very talented players that you can use in multiple parts of the ground. So as much as I love your spreadsheet, absolutely fantastic, and I love that, and I love your dedication to that. But you're going a little bit off last year's results too, and I think every single one, Port Adelaide's the only one of the expansion teams that I sit here and I go, did they really progress a lot? I think Hawthorn progressed a lot. I think Essendon, Brooke Brown, it's progression. Is it that huge step that Hawthorn and Sydney did? No, but I think Brooke Brown addressed a need that they needed, and they did it quite well. Port Adelaide, They got the spearhead in Ashley Saint, which was, again, we'll talk Port Adelaide a little bit later. But is Port really done a ton to improve themselves? We'll have to see. We can discuss that a little bit later. But I I think all the expansion teams are going to be scrappy this year. Top
Yeah.
four sides, they're probably going to struggle, and you can understand that because you have some of the best teams with some of the best talent in the entire competition. But I think those mid levels, the Richmonds, the Geelongs, the Fremantles, the Gold Coast, the GWSs, they could struggle with some of these teams. They could have hard days. I think this could be a quagmire middle of the
Yeah.
ladder this year, which is going to be fun. Could make the finals run quite interesting. So we'll jump to it. I know you don't want to talk about Essendon any more than you have to, so we will jump away and we will head out west to Fremantle and a team that I'm thoroughly intrigued for because this is a team that last year absolutely struggled, absolutely just could not catch a break. So we go to Fremantle and look at their ins and outs this year. And again, some tough outs, some outs that they lost that I think are really gonna hurt them a little bit. Janelle Cuthbertson finding her way over to Port Adelaide, Amy Franklin getting traded, Talia Reid getting traded, Bianca Webb being delisted. So you kind of look at it. Cara Antonio's retirement is it the huge loss? Yes, because for the experience. Is it huge loss on the field? Again, all due respect to Cara Antonio, but I think her time was up. So I think this isn't a bad retirement. This helps out. They got some additions. Again, they kind of like Carlton had a lot of draft picks. So your thoughts on some of their ins and outs, because this is a team, they didn't change a ton, but some of the changes I think were necessary.
Yeah, well, they lost a lot of players during the season last year. Like I would have thought when I was
Mhm.
going through this, they had a lot of inactive players. They actually didn't. They lost a lot of them early in the season. Unfortunately, young gun Michaela Morrison, who I really rate, I really like watching her play. She's out again for this season. She's done her ACL. She's not currently on the inactive list, technically speaking, so the Dockers can still open up a list spot, which I think they should, like because she's not going to play. Unfortunately, she's done her other ACL this time, so speedy recovery, Michaela. I personally love watching you play and can't wait to see you back out there.
Mhm.
Janelle Cuthbertson is a loss. Amy Franklin, I think, is a massive loss for their future as a key forward. She was just starting to really come into her own a bit in the second half of last season. Now they've lost her. You know, she could have been a terrific foil for Anya Tai, who is a superb footballer.
Mhm.
Serena Gibbs has come in, and other than that, they've mainly just hit the draft really hard. With again, not really sure this is the draft I want to be hitting hard, other than by necessity. But they've taken some flyers and some interesting talent, so I'll be curious to see what they do. Cuthbertson, I think, would have been more of a loss 3 years ago than she
Mhm.
is now. That's no knock on Janelle Cuthbertson; she's still a very good player, but they're able to cover her a little bit more down back now.
Mhm.
I do think Franklin is their biggest loss. You know, Talia Reid never played. She was traded, but she never actually played due to injury. You know, the Dockers last year, they were just decimated by injuries mid-season to
Mhm.
the point where they had to use a top-up player in one of their games. They are very thin in their tall back line, and that's where they might be in some trouble. They might wind up conceding a lot of goals to tall forwards, just because I think their back line's so thin in those tall
Mhm.
stocks. But I don't think they can have worse luck than they did last year. It's just a matter of how much do the players they've lost, like Cara Antonio, who only played one game last year. So you look at her as a loss off the list, but she's not really a loss in terms of actual performance from last season because she played one game.
Mhm.
But I look at them. Ebony Antonio played 2 games. Gabby O'Sullivan played 6. Maddie Scanlon played 4. Was Lara played 3. They've lost. Just getting a full season out of some of their better players is going to be massive for them. Their draw, and again, yes, my draw is based off last year's statistics. It's the best data we currently have to go off.
Mhm.
Is pretty much smack bang in the middle of the competition. So I think the Dockers are just about the highest variance team in the competition for me. I could conceivably see them getting up as high as about 6th. I could also see them finishing 15th. Like, I
Mhm.
think they have the greatest degree of variance of any team in the competition. They play Melbourne in round 9. They play a preliminary finalist. They play the Swans at the end of the season. They play North Melbourne as well. They play North. When do they play North? They play North round 6. So it's going to be an interesting season for the Dockers. I do think they've got the most variance. Their turnover is not that massive last year. It was huge, but
Hmm.
this year it's a little bit more stable, and they're just going to be hoping to actually have their players fit. I do think Serena Gibbs is a handy pickup. She can play both ends.
Hmm.
She's going to play in defense. Like, even if she wants to play forward, it's Homer Simpson's favorite two words: default. You're in the back line. There's no one else.
I love that one, which is actually how you kind of address that kind of covers in my question. And I thought, like I said, after a horrid year, combination of both injury and result, will the Dockers bounce back this year? I I kind of agree with you. New coaching staff. So we'll have to see. Does their game style change? Do they keep that run and gun style that they had under their previous coach? I'm interested. I kind of want to put this question on pause a little bit because I want to wait. I want to see the first 3 or 4 games because if they're competitive in their first few games, they get a couple of wins that is maybe steal one that they weren't expecting to, then I think you see a bounce back. Then I think I agree with you. Then you're are they potentially a finals kind of a stealer of maybe a Richmond spot or a Geelong spot or a Western Bulldogs spot in the finals. But if they don't, it could be again another long season, a lot like Carlton, where they're down there with potentially the wooden spoon potential contention, which will be fascinating to see again. This Dockers team again, I'm fascinated by them because there is so much intrigue. There's not a lot that I know. How's their coach? How's their new coach going to change their game style? I'm fascinated by them. This is a team I'm going to keep an eye on because I just want to know what are we going to get from the Dockers this year. So your thoughts, Liam?
We'll know a lot about them after round 4. I've just had a look at their fixture. They play West Coast, Collingwood, Hawthorn at home, and then the team we talked about before, the Dockers.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Cannot even mention its name. I love the rivalry. This is great.
I think we're going to know a lot about them after round 4. And again, similar way, I'm going to phrase my answer to your question similar to how I phrased the Collingwood answer. Can they? Yes, they can.
Mm-hmm.
Will they? I don't know. It's going to depend on a lot on their preseason, their injuries, and how quickly they gel under Lisa Webb as a new coach. Although, again, Michaela Morrison, no one's really talked about it because she didn't play last year either. They would have been banking on her to return in a big way because she is a player I really, really rate.
Mm-hmm. I'm 100% with you. It is devastating to see her have another knee injury because I was really looking forward to it because she's absolutely electric with footy in hand. One of those ones that I think would have complemented Anya Tai going forward, unfortunately. So speedy, I agree with you. Speedy recovery to her. Hopefully she gets back sooner rather than later, and hopefully she's back for season 9. So we jump to it down to GMHBA in Victoria and the Geelong Cats, a team that made finals last year, fell a little bit short, but a lot of young talent and a team that defensively is one of the best in the entire competition and has some electric superstars in Nina Morrison and Prosparkis. So I'm fascinated by this. The ins and outs for Geelong is rather small, not a lot of change, but some changes were made.
Yeah, so they've delisted Georgia Clark and Kalani Skula. Laura Gardner's been traded. She played most games, but only averaged 63% game time, so she probably will left to go to the Swans to get a bit more stable opportunity. Again, if you're only getting 63% time on ground, it probably says the coaches aren't that trusting of you in terms of stability, and if you're in and out of the team especially. And then Maddie Carrick came in round 4, but then was not selected in the finals, so she probably wanted a bit more stability in the back line as well. So they haven't really lost anyone they would have genuinely considered among their main assets. Kate Sermon should be a good pickup as a small forward. I do think she doesn't hit the scoreboard the way they would like her to. I think that will improve playing a better team. Like, it's a bit easier to score in the forward line when the ball's actually getting there with a bit more regularity. Port Adelaide, like Geelong will get the ball inside 50 more than Port Adelaide. They're just a better team. Erin Hall is an interesting pickup at pick 1 in the draft. And then the 2 Irish players, obviously, you don't know much about Ashley Maloney or Anna Rose Kennedy. Mike Carone, who you chatted to recently, might know a bit more about what they look like as players, obviously, because he scouts the Irish players a lot more than any of us are capable of doing. But
From what I gather, these are a couple of really good players that I think the biggest thing will be the transition to the oval ball. But with a lot of the Irish players that I've talked with him, I kind of like I said, I got a little bit on several players. In fact, I think Carlton's Irish recruits I think are some of the best in the competition. So we didn't really discuss that. When you brought it up, it just kind of it kicked back into me. I think Carlton, one of their Irish players, probably one. He said one of the best that's going to come over. Hannah Dunn, who's going to play for Brisbane, he's really high on her. But Aisling Maloney is one of those that was a superstar player over in Gaelic. So this is a fantastic addition. If you really look at it, the four that Geelong picked up, I think, not only bring depth and talent. So this is a Geelong team I think is really, really going to progress. I think they're going to be fascinating. I think they make finals again this year too, because with as long as again, touch wood, Nina Morrison and Georgie Pasparkas don't have any injury issues because that won't hurt. But Amy McDonald had a fantastic season last year, potentially. If she has another cracker like that, I mean, potential for best and fairest could definitely be in the marks, especially if Geelong is in when the whips are cracking.
I mean, Amy McDonald's an All-Australian footballer. Chloe Shear is an All-Australian forward. They had a soft draw last year and made the finals, but again, their draw's not that difficult this year either. Like it
Mm-hmm.
ranks again based on last year's score differentials, it ranks 13th. Like it's in the bottom third of draws. It's one of the easiest 6 draws in the competition based on that metric. George Prasparkas was terrific last season. Does she perhaps level off before going up a level? I think that may be the case, just with some more midfielders coming back in, a bit more pressure and a bit more pressure on her as well. Players who I'm a big fan of at other clubs than my own, outside of players who play my favourite position of ruck, Nina Morrison is number 1 on the list for me.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love watching her play. I will gladly sit down every weekend, irrespective of what else I'm doing, and watch Nina Morrison play football. She is just a terrific footballer, inside, outside, clean, good size. She is just, and if she didn't have those 2 ACL injuries, she'd be an All-Australian by now.
Mm-hmm.
My prediction.
You are not going to get any
There's no way
argument
of
from
proving
me.
or disproving that.
You are not getting argument from me. I think Nina Morrison is one of those that she when she breaks out, she's had some great stints. I think being on a team with Georgia Prasparkas and Amy McDonald the last couple of years is that I think some people have kind of taken her for granted a little bit, which is weird saying for such a talented player. But I think she hasn't had to be the number one fiddle, which I think has kind of helped her, but has also kind of hindered her too, because I think she's kind of sat in the background a little bit. I want that breakout season for her. I want her to have that great year. But I do kind of like having her ability to go out on the wing and be able to kind of get away from the center mid to kind of take a little bit off of her a little bit, which I think would be fast. Again, this is a Geelong team that's so much fun to watch, so sound defensively. And maybe it's the coaching background in me that I love watching a good defensive team play good footy and be able to shut a team down and to keep them from scoring. And Chloe Shear hopping on, and offensively they have progressed. I think Kate Sermon, I think I agree with you. I think Kate Sermon is really going to benefit from coming into this team, but it's going to be fun watching their small forwards go off of Chloe Shear, because I think their small forwards can have a field day if they get the delivery like they do from Amy McDonald, from Georgie Prasparkas, and from Nina Morrison. So this is a Cats team that I only see positives from. Like, they were a finals team last year, and I think they have a really, really good shot of making finals this year, which is actually a great transition to my question is, can the Cats make finals again this year? I know it's a simple question. Can they make finals this year? I think yes. I think the list that they have, I think the draw, as you kind of said, isn't super tough. So I think they're going to win enough games to be there. The interesting thing would be once they get there, what damage can they do? Came out a little bit earlier this year, but they add some good depth to their team. I think they could be a scary team if they start to click at the right time.
Yeah, can make finals and would be very surprised if they didn't make finals. I think can and will, to be honest, for me.
Mm-hmm. I am 100% with you. So we go hop on a plane. We'll go up to Queensland, up to the Gold Coast Suns, and a team that, I mean, the ins and outs are long for the Gold Coast, because they were very, very active in the trade period, moving several players both in and out. So I will not take away from your lovely worksheet here, Liam. go through this because I'm not sure which is more impressive. Their ends with some of the people that they are bringing in, including Neve McLaughlin, another rookie from Ireland that I get Michael Curran is absolutely super high on coming over and making an impact this year. But Clara Fitzpatrick brings some great defensive ability there. Maddie Periscano from Richmond, I think, is a great add there. But some of their losses, I mean, Courtney Jones had a heck of a season. Ellie Hampson moving over, and Serene Watson, unfortunately, moving out in that huge trade with St. Kilda and Collingwood.
Yeah, they're going to miss Watson's ability to just be plug and play.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fact she can go on ball on the wing at halfback, even half forward, the fact that she's just plug and play and can do a job, they'll miss that. Courtney Jones will be a loss to the forward line. Goal a game, mid-sized forwards who link the play and hit the scoreboard with 40% of their disposal in some way, shape, or form. They don't grow on trees in this competition.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real loss. There, a couple of others, Claire Ransom's inactive. She only played 2 games last year, though. Anyway, Fitzpatrick, I agree with you, is a great pickup. The one I'm really interested in actually is Jordan Membry.
Mm-hmm.
She's one of the most ruthlessly efficient forwards in the competition. She struggles to find the football, but if she gets it, like she marks well, she pressures, she just doesn't get the opportunity as much. If she gets opportunities, she's a 5-to-1 goal to behind ratio player. She is a lethal finisher. If you give her a chance, she is taking it.
Mm-hmm.
So she's kicked 14 goals, 3 from 22 career shots at goal, according to AFLW stats.
Mm-hmm.
That is just ruthless. That is lethal. So if you're able to create her 2 chances a game, you're hitting the scoreboard in a not insignificant way with her. If she gets 2 chances a game, statistically, she's kicking 15 goals for the year. That's not a bad asset to have in your forward line, especially with some of the other talent they've got around her, and in the midfield especially. The midfield's probably their strongest. When you look at Rowbottom, Drennan, and Whitford, that's a really, really strong.
Well, and throw in your favorite position. Lauren Bella is probably one of the best rucks in the competition, and I think the only thing I'd love to see Lauren do just a little bit more this year is make a little bit more of an impact disposal wise. I think she's a great tapper. She's a great tap ruck. She's got great aerobic ability. She can get around the ground. That's fine. But I kind of want to see her do a little bit more with footy in hand when she does get it, because I think that's been one of her issues. Is she shies away from the footy just a littlest bit, just because I think she's still kind of learning the disposal efficiency. But I think if she can be a little bit more efficient to where she can kind of take a little bit of pressure off of the Drennans and the Rowbottoms a little bit, I think that's only going to help. And as you said, Jordan Membry, dangerous up forward. If she's getting a lot of delivery from an Ellie Drennan, from a Rowbottom, and then Lauren Bella starts getting into the ability to put it into forward line, you're going to have a field day with Kalinda Howarth, Jordan Membry, and oh my gosh, I can't remember their full forward's name. Why do I always lose it when I need them? Where is it? Tara Bohanna. If those 3 there can be on, which unfortunately sometimes the Gold Coast was a little wayward going on goal. If Bohannon, if Jordan Membry and Kalinda Howarth get going, this is a dangerous Gold Coast team when they can get on. So this is a Gold Coast team I'm going to be super excited to watch, is how these new additions fit into this new team and how it will progress a very young side, but a very talented Gold Coast side.
Can I give you one more name?
Sure.
Darcy Davies.
Mm-hmm.
18, just turned 18 not long ago. She's an inactive replacement. The Suns had to get special dispensation to sign her out of their academy. From all accounts, she is a supreme talent. 184 centimeters, ruck forward. From all accounts, she is an absolute star.
Mm-hmm.
So she might actually be a real asset as well coming into the side. Like, there's a lot of buzz about Darcy Davies being an asset from day one.
Yep,
I've heard about her. Youngest player in the competition. 184 centimeters, terrific size. Players like that don't grow on trees in this comp. So I think she might be a player just to mark down your little book as well.
Yep, and a lot of G, because she hurt her knee last year, didn't play, and she's a really good draft pick, and I've heard a lot of good things. Again, this is a Gold Coast team, super young, super talented, but still a little young. So you may see some growing pains a little bit with this team. Unfortunately, it seems like that's always their issue is that they're always a young team. So I'll be fascinated, but talented on their day. If they can get that talent going, could be scary to watch as the season goes on. So we jump again. I think the Gold Coast, it's another one, a young and talented team. Is finals a must this year? Is it one of those where it should be? Would the season be a failure if they don't make finals this year?
If their draw didn't rank as highly as it did for difficulty, I'd say yes, it would be. If they're below 10th, I would still say it's a failure. But the reality is they're going to play 5 of last year's finals teams back to back from rounds 3 to 7.
Oh boy.
Like, that is a brutal run of fixtures.
Yeah.
I look at it. They've got the Pies, the Dogs, the Crows, Richmond, and the Lions back to back to back to back to back.
Mm-hmm.
And then they play the team we talked about before, the Dockers, in round 10. Yeah, they don't have an easy draw. Like, their draw is very difficult for a team that finished where they did. And we'll talk about another team that finished lower down the ladder. It's got an even harder draw in a couple of minutes. Their draw has come at them hard. I would say they certainly can make finals. If they had what I would call an average draw, I think they would make finals, to be honest, probably sneak into the 8. I just think their draw is going to get them.
Yeah, unfortunately, again, but this is a super talented team, and I think as they progress, I think this is a good year to kind of test them, battle harden them a little bit. And like I said, you get Alana G's coming back from a knee injury, so I don't want to put a ton of pressure on her. As you said, Davies, a young player, I think, get her some experience out on the park. I said this could be one of those for Gold Coast. You almost want to look at next year or maybe the year after as that maybe that breakout finals potential. Become a sleeper team. They'll be fun to watch. So we jump from Queensland back to New South Wales to a GWS team that again has been one of those that has done my head in a little bit these last couple of years, because if you look at their list, and as talented as they were, they just never could break past 10th. They were always 10th to 12th, and they just could never get past that. Tough team, can always give a challenge to some of the uppers, but occasionally have those stinkers where they play a lower team and keep a game competitive that probably shouldn't have. So we'll go in the in and outs, and it almost kind of goes with my question. In fact, I'll ask my question because it kind of relates to our ins and outs. Is that 2 massive retirements from GWS, I think, are going to be huge factors for them, with both Cora Staunton and Bridstack. So how will this year go with the fact that you lose your number 1 goal kicker for the club in AFLW, and a very stout, very staunch defender in Bridstack, both hanging up the boots and returning to Ireland?
I their players returning from inactive are going to help a lot. Getting Izzy Huntington back is going to be great. Like that will go a long way to covering the loss of Cora Staunton. The fact that Isabel Huntington is coming back. Fleur Davies, I think, is going to be a really good pickup for them as well. She was inactive last season with injury. Young, really good ruck. Probably most people's fantasy teams, again, just quietly. Gaffney is going to be a loss to their forward line. They still have a vacant list spot as well, so perhaps they can go about using that. But yeah, they've got a lot. They've got talent coming back as well. I think I'm going to be controversial. I almost think Stack is the bigger loss because they've got a more ready replacement for Cora Staunton with Izzy Huntington.
I don't think that's too controversial.
In isolation, you might say, well, surely someone might argue Staunton's a bigger loss. I would argue there's a more ready-made replacement for Staunton with Izzy Huntington than there is with Breed Stack. And yep, they've got some talent there. Pepper Randall is going to be, there's question marks over her body. Still, I think she played in the match sim, and I think she's playing this week. So we'll know a lot more about that. Isadora McLeay as well is someone I'm interested to see. 180 centimeters, coming back from a knee injury. She was inactive last year. She turned 20 until September, so she might be a really handy pickup. And then the other one is Tegan Gurmich. She's an inactive replacement, but she's a slightly undersized, actually probably not undersized, 177 centimeter key defender who can also play as an inside midfielder. Although I think just given, you look at Alicia Eve and Elise Parker, they're reasonably well stocked there. So I think Gurmich is going to be probably deployed as a backline in the backline to help cover, the massive loss that is Breed Stack. But yeah, I think I don't think the losses of those names are as big as they sound because of what they've got coming back off the inactive list.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Isabel Huntington is going to be fascinating to see how she fits in. And again, Cora Staunton was such the like it was almost if Cora didn't kick goals, GWS didn't win games. So I just hope Isabel Huntington coming back from a knee injury doesn't have that kind of pressure. Like I agree with you. I think Bridstack, because it is a point in the ground where GWS has got to play good defensively because a young coming from an injury, Ruck, we won't say Ruckman, my apologies. Ruck and Fleur Davies, ton of talent, but she's going to go through growing pains because there are some very good Rucks in the competition. It's not going to be an easy welcome to the AFLW for her. But Isabel Huntington, I kind of look at it, I just don't want her to turn into that situation a lot like Cora Staunton, where it's like if Isabel isn't kicking goals, GWS doesn't go anywhere. Like there has to be some spread of the abilities to be able to put goals on for GWS because that has really cost them some games that they probably should have won in the last few seasons that they didn't because Cora Staunton was not able to find the scoreboard. So it's a GWS team I'm fascinated to watch because if you look at their list, if you look at the way they kind of are constructed, there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of skill, there's a lot of experience spread throughout this roster. Again, Elise Parker, one of the best midfielders in the entire competition. It's hard to see. She gets in and under, she gets the footy, she gets it out. Really good with disposal. Alicia Eva, the constant captain, the veteran, the bull, the tough nut in the midfield for GWS. It's always fun to watch. Isabel Huntington, I'm glad she's back. I just hope she can stay healthy and that there's no issues with her and I want to see her succeed. Peperando coming back in the back line, I think will be fascinating for that. So this is a GWS team again, looking on paper, this is a potential list that can make finals. They've fallen short the last couple of seasons, unfortunately. And again, I agree with you. I think Bridstack might be the bigger loss because can they replace her tough, gritty ability in the back line to be able to just sit on a person and be able to kind of take them out of the game. So let's jump to it. The lovely jersey sitting back there with the pens of all of the lovely young women that have hopped on to your podcast, Soaring to New Heights. I will let you go, sir. Talk about your beloved Hawks, the additions, which I know are making you grin. I can just see the grin start to form on your face, knowing Emily Bates and Greta Bodie will be now donning the brown and gold.
Yeah, so quickly on the losses, Dom Carbone and Izzy Porter were listed. I'd still be a little bit surprised if someone didn't pick up Dom Carbone with one of their vacant list spots because she can play forward or mid. She's a really talented player. Eliza Shannon traded to North Melbourne. Kate McCarthy retired. And then probably the biggest loss is Jess Duffin, who was our leading goal kicker and also a superb defender. Quite amazing how she was able to do both things while pregnant.
During playing footy, I still cannot believe that she was pregnant last year, was playing AFLW. That is absolutely insane. Incredible. So sorry, I don't mean to step on you there, but that was mental. I could not believe that when I saw that in news that she was pregnant while she was playing last year.
And then, but even against you guys, for example, her and Lucy Wales were the two players who kept us in that game in the first quarter, and then we just wheeled you back in from there. Don't get me started about Lucy Wales, please. That could go all day. The gains, Greta Bodie and Emily Bates as priority signings. Greta's going to be a terrific addition to our forward line. She already looked great. I went down to the match sim last weekend. She was superb. She is absolutely rapid. She doesn't hit the scoreboard with direct goals the way a lot of people think she does, but she is one of the highest score involvement players in the competition. She creates opportunities for her teammates, and she's got so much gravity that, Sophie Locke, Talia Fellows, even, the likes of Anya McDonough and Bridie Hipwell must just be thrilled that Greta Bodie is going to draw so much attention and create so much space in the forward line and the way she moves as well. Emily Bates, I don't think I need to say much about her. She's really, really good at football. She's a big-bodied midfielder who gets on the outside as well. She runs to space incredibly well. Beautiful left boot, uses the ball superbly, tackles, a very complete midfielder. Again, I don't really need to talk much about her. Case Dumont is another sport rookie. She's going to be a backup ruck, which we are in dire need of, but she, driving standards, she is a superb professional, a really good player. And again, her size and athleticism is only going to serve us well if we need it. Christy Stratton, pick 18 in the draft, midfielder, small forward, good goal sense, really great tackler when she was at the Pies. There was one season where she played half the game. She had a lot of injuries, unfortunately. Really talented player, though. And then Matea Breed, who was actually among our best players. Time recording, I think the most recent podcast we dropped was my 7-minute recap of our match sim against the Dogs. And Matea Breed was one of our most impressive players. I actually had a chat to her after the game. Check out the Soaring to New Heights socials if you want to see me having a very quick chat to Matea Breed. And you can also, when you see me stand next to it, you'll see why I like rucks.
Mm-hmm.
I played that position. But no, she is a super impressive player. I said in another episode that, I thought she'd probably debut in the second half of the season. That might age like milk in the Sahara. I think she might debut in the first couple of weeks. She is a really impressive player, super athletic, great hands, links the play really well. So, I mean, the Hawks have made some great additions, although I think the loss of Jess Duffin is often glossed over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can gloss over losing your leading goal kicker and one of your best defenders in one person. Like, it's not, the additions aren't straight additions, if that makes sense. There are subtractions as well, which I think need to be taken into account more. I am the noted pragmatist of the two on Soaring to New Heights, it'd be fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm noted as not perhaps being as optimistic as Timmy, but I'm so excited with the additions we've got this season.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm very interested to see how Emily Bates and Greta Bodie come in. Again, it's sad having Jess Duffin retire, but again, what an incredible career she had. And I love she brought some veteran leadership to this Hawthorn team. So it'll be fascinating. So I'll ask my question here, Liam. Do the two big inclusions, though, again, I'm not trying to gloss over the Jess Duffin loss, which I agree with you is massive. Does this make the Hawks a finals contender, or are we still a couple of seasons away from really talking the 8?
Couple of seasons away. As much as I'd like to be optimistic, I look at our draw. We're one of 4 teams who played both grand finalists. We ranked the 3rd hardest for opposition, plus minus from last season. We have 5 finalists, all of whom we either lost to or are Melbourne. Like last year, Melbourne and Geelong. Like, the reality is we're playing 5 finals. We're playing 3 other teams who beat us last year, a couple of them quite well. It's just going to be a really difficult. We've got the 3rd hardest draw in the competition by opponent plus minus. Like, when I saw that draw come out, I almost spat out my water at work. I was like, we finish 14th, and then we get the 3rd hardest draw in the competition. Like, it doesn't seem to stack up, if that makes sense. I'm not a conspiratorial person, though. If you listen to Soaring to New Heights, I'm not above potting the AFL for the way they treat this competition.
I agree.
They might. I don't think I'm on their Christmas card list. That way, I give a fair few drive-bys about the way they treat this competition, none of which are undeserved.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think we're a couple of years away from being a real finals contender, which is fine. We have a lot of young players. We had 5 players completing their schooling last year. And we also had Mackenzie Eadley, who was the same age as them, but as a January birthday had graduated the year before. So I think we're a couple of years away from finals. I do think the talent at the Hawks is immense. I will give a rising star prediction, and as Charlotte Baskarin, I think she is a superb footballer. I just think we just need to strengthen a bit more at the bookends of the ground and get a bit more continuity there. And also get a clearer picture of what our midfield mix looks like. Tilly Lucas-Rod is a star. Tamara Smith, again, I've said on the podcast a couple of times, I think if a puppy turned up in an opposition jumper, she'd go find a way of tackling that.
I love it.
But yeah, I think we need a couple more years of development, and I have complete faith. Soaring to New Heights may as well be renamed the Beck Goddard Appreciation Society. So love Beck Goddard, what she's done for this club. She's the best recruit the Hawks have had in 10 years at least. But yeah, I still think Hawthorn are a couple of years away from finals, because make no mistake, the quality of football the Hawks played last year would win the premiership in season 1. By so far, it's not funny. But as we're really good at seeing where our teams are going to progress and the natural progression of our young players, we're not as good at looking at the fact that there are 17 other clubs who are also going to be having a lot of natural progression from their young players. So it's not like our progression is going to be just that. It's not like we're going to improve by X, but other teams are going to improve by Y, and then the gap is the actual change is just the difference between the two. It's not just our improvement. So Hawthorn I actually think with our draw, Hawthorn could be a better team than last year and there's a distinct possibility we win fewer games despite being so much better because our draw is that much harder.
Yep, makes it. Unfortunately, it's the way things kind of went, which kind of stinks because it almost kind of puts this false narrative out there a little bit that they've regressed, and I don't think that's the truth. I think they are going to be quite the good football team. I just think they're going to have difficult. I think keep an eye on it. They may put a scare into a few teams, may even steal one or two. So Hawthorne's another one. Hawthorne, Essendon, and Sydney, I think all progressed a lot because of the priority signing periods. I think it's going to be fascinating to see. I think Port was the only one I was a little disappointed in because I think, again, no, this is no disrespect to Ashley saying I think she's a great addition, but I really didn't see a huge amount of progression for Port Adelaide when it comes to bringing in a little bit more talent. I think they kind of, I think it was a neutral for them. I don't think they got better from their signings. I think they kind of stayed about the same, little but not massive. So we jump from Hawthorn to the defending premiers in Melbourne. And I mean, I hate saying it, but looking at their ends list, I think they even got better. I know they lose Daisy Pierce. I know this is massive, and I know it's almost like this Geelong team this year is everybody's like, it's not going to be much of a difference since Joel Selwood. Daisy Pierce will be a loss, but if you look at their additions, they bring in a few players that were injured last year that are very, very good, and Eliza McNamara and Gabby Colvin, both really good players. And Amy Mackin, the Irish recruit, the sister of Blathen Mackin, is one of the best in all of Ireland. And many people, this is almost a little bit of a coup for Melbourne to bring in the sister of Blathen Mackin, who is very, very good herself. And Amy could be just as good, if not even a little better. So this is a scary Melbourne team that I think could, again, be the class of the entire competition.
Yeah. I think they're more likely to go undefeated than they are to miss a prelim. They're
Mhm.
that good.
Yep.
To be honest, I'm almost tipping them to go undefeated. To me, they're in a league of their own at the moment.
Mhm.
This Melbourne team, the only premiership player is Pierce, and I'm not going to say for 1 minute she's not going to be a loss as a
Mhm.
footballer and as a leader. That
I
would just
agree.
be dishonest to
Mhm.
say she's not going to be a loss.
And just be a flat out lie.
We also can't. It would also be a lie to say she was the All Australian superstar that we've seen in previous years. Last season, she averaged career lows in a lot of metrics. Again, not taking anything away from her, she is one of the greatest assets the AFL has had in a long time. The AFLW, one of the best players ever.
Mhm.
But
She was Melbourne's utility knife. I think the reason that she was down a little bit was because she was used in different parts of the ground. I mean, she was a defender for the early part. She went forward again this year, kind of to fill spots where they had a few holes. So she was their utility knife. So she was constantly on the move because she's such a good player. She can go anywhere on the ground and make an impact. So I agree with you. She's a massive loss, especially for leadership. But I think talent wise, I think they almost got a little bit better talent wise, at least for present day. Again,
yeah,
no disrespect to Daisy at all. Don't anyone that's listening. I mean, no disrespect to Daisy. I love Daisy to death. Again, all time legend, one of the best to play so far that's been through the league. But Amy Mackin coming in, Gabby Colvin coming back. This is a Melbourne team that got better, and it's scary to say.
yeah, this Melbourne team. Again, I think they could go unbeaten. I genuinely think they could go undefeated.
Would not surprise me. It would not surprise me a bit. So I'll ask the question: can they be the first ever team to go back to back premieres? I'm going to say yes. I honestly think they can. They're they're definitely a scary proposition. Now, this is also going on paper a little bit. We don't know how injuries may stack up this year. How does some of their elite players like a Kate Hoare, like a Taylor Harris, a some of their best players, if they go down with injury, it could change situations a little bit. But just going on paper, just going on their list, Melbourne has a really good shot of being the first ever back-to-back premiers.
You could say that about any team that if they
Mhm.
lose players, they're not going to be as good. Like you could say that about any team.
Mhm.
But I just think this Melbourne team are frankly a step above the rest of the competition right now,
Yep.
especially with what Brisbane have lost. This Melbourne team are to me they're just a level above at the moment.
Yep.
Again, they are right now my unequivocal tip for the flag. I know we'll talk about that later,
Mhm.
but they are to me clearly the favourites for the premiership.
Okay, so when now we go from Melbourne again, I know there's just huge raps on Melbourne, but we jump over to a team I think has a lot of huge raps themselves. They may take a few lists, but I think this is a really good team. We jump to North Melbourne, who again I think could potentially be that second to third team that I think could potentially see themselves in their first ever grand final. So really, really quickly, we look at it. Some new additions to North Melbourne that I think will be fascinating to see how they go, and some losses, as we kind of already discussed with Brooke Brown moving over out of North Melbourne. So your thoughts on some of their ins and outs, because again, a lot of ins and outs, but for the most part, I think North Melbourne got just a little. They got better, which is kind of scary to think because this is already a really good North Melbourne team.
They absolutely got better. Kate Shearlaw is a great addition to their forward line. Brooke Brown's a loss in defence. Although Eliza Shannon is not Brooke Brown, but she's courageous. She's a good medium-sized defender. She's reliable. Whether she plays every week, I don't know with North Melbourne, but I do think she's definitely a piece that a club like North Melbourne would like having, knowing that she can just turn up, do a job, doesn't care if she gets the football, just happy to just lock her opponent out of a game, flies back with reckless abandon at times. Really, really handy ass to have in your back pocket. Ella Moore is a bit of a loss. Really surprised they delisted Sophia Batangelo. That
Mhm.
one, probably of all delistings across the whole competition, that shocked me the most. Danielle Hardiman's retired. Vicky Wall is a huge loss to their inactive list. Obviously, again, showing how incredible some of these female athletes are. The fact that she can just decide, okay, I'll play Gaelic football. No, I won't go be a great AFLW player this season. I'm just going to go try and be an Olympian instead in rugby sevens. Like just just casually one of the best going around at three different sports. It's quite ridiculous, frankly.
Mhm.
Like how Jess Duffin as well, who we talked about earlier, was an incredible cricketer as
Mhm.
well, and actually was also a dominant cricketer while pregnant as well. Interesting story there. I'll let you
Mhm.
research that in your own time, people. But no, I do think North Melbourne are better. Lulu Pullar is a handy addition to the back line. She's more of an addition to North Melbourne than she was a loss to Brisbane because she was a bit of a fringe player at Brisbane towards the end. She'll be a
Mhm.
really handy pickup at North Melbourne in the area, especially with having lost Brooke Brown, like I talked about Eliza Shannon,
Yep.
where they need a bit of extra support. Kate Shearlaw to me is the big one, though. A forward presence which they've needed and is there now. Jazz Garner must just be licking her lips with being able to deliver the ball to Kate Shearlaw, and Kate Shearlaw must be absolutely thrilled knowing that she's going to have Jazz Garner streaming out of the midfield to deliver the football to her. They've delisted Grace Matza, which is, she was really good for Box Hill in the VFLW this season, though never really got a game. So, but I mean, I look at this team; it's strong. They've got medium defenders who are in and out at other clubs. Liz McGrath, handy backup ruck. Neve Martin from Ireland is athletic. She'll be, I don't know where they'll deploy her yet, but she can seriously play.
Mhm.
Then, you just look at their list. Emma Carney, Jazz Gardner, Jenna Bruton. Like, there's just so much talent there. They've got Mia Rennie and Emma King in the ruck. Their
Mhm.
draw last year was brutal. They only finished eighth on the ladder because they played every other team that made the finals.
Mhm.
Their draw again this year ranks as the hardest in the competition by opponent plus minus, but they still play five teams that didn't make the finals last year. That's perhaps enhanced by the fact they don't play any of the real bottom feeders from last year, as I would call them. Like they
Mhm.
don't play a Hawthorn or West Coast of Sydney who had really, really bad score differentials last year. But they do have, they like all the other big four, they play the other three. But their draw's not, I don't think their draw's as difficult as it was
Mhm.
last season. Because
I
last
agree.
season they had 7 games against finalists. This year they have 5 against last year's finalists.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's no secret I'm a massive fan of Gemma Bastiani and the work she does. She almost has North Melbourne winning the flag. I can't go that far because I just don't think I struggle to see people beating Melbourne. But I can't see North Melbourne missing the prelim if they remain healthy.
Mhm. I'm one of those. I'm really high on North Melbourne. I agree with Gemma Bastia. I think they get to a grand final, which I actually is perfect transition to my question is that after an outstanding season last year, despite the fact that they had the toughest draw, they finished eighth. They weren't the eighth best team. They were the fourth best, and they proved it going through and getting to a preliminary final. So they got to a preliminary final. Can they get over the next hump and get to a granny this year? I'm going to answer this question. I think they can. Like, I think Adelaide has taken a step back or two, unfortunately. Yes, still super talented. Hatchard, Ebony Marinoff, so much talent, but they're stepping back because a lot of their role players are starting to have to play more and more bigger roles. And I'm not sure if that's going to enhance the team a little bit. I think they've regressed a little bit. Brisbane, I think Bates and Bodie and their losses, I think will regress them a little bit. Yes, they've got a lot of great talent, but it's young and it's still progressing. So I think North Melbourne, this is the perfect opportunity to get to a grand final, and they've got the talent that I think they can stay with with Melbourne. I don't know if they have enough talent to defeat them, but I think this year could potentially see a North versus Melbourne grand final potentially if things go well. I agree with you. I think their draw is a little bit easier, which I think will then see them finish fourth, third, or I think they're going to be a top four side, which gives them the double chance in the finals, which I think is going to be a great way for them to find a way into the grand final. Your thoughts? I think grand final is possible.
I think grand final is absolutely possible. Again, it's they can. I don't know if they will, but they certainly can. I do agree. Adelaide, I don't think Adelaide are going to go as far back as you think because they were already struggling to score a bit last year. So just losing Ash Saint is obviously a massive out, but they just need to. Adelaide will depend on how much they can score. Mm-hmm. Like they're great at the other two lines. And I mean, they've got Chelsea Randall. That helps a little bit in terms of just being able to.
She can go anywhere you need her, which is, I mean,
basically anywhere but the ruck. Chelsea Randall can go there, and even then, I'm sure I still think she'd find a way to play in the ruck. But
I agree. I think she'd just shark the ruck. She'd just let the other ruck, and then she'd go after the tap. So
Brisbane, sure. I think Brisbane, they will take a step back, but they were so far ahead. Even their step back is still at the front of the pack. But I think North Melbourne, they've improved, especially bolstering their key forward stocks with Shearlaw. Mm-hmm. I just think they're such a good team. Yeah, Vic Wall is a big loss, and losing Wall and the delisting of Abertangelo looks different now, having lost Vicky Wall. Mm-hmm. I would say, but there's still a lot of talent there. They've brought in Lucy Burke and Ailish Considine, obviously from Adelaide. Don't know how much she'll play, but is a very handy depth piece. Wing half forward. Wall's a tough player to replace. Considine's probably the closest thing they're going to have for that in terms of the role. And I mean, she's also takes the inactive slot created by Wall. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one watching North. I do think they are minimum preliminary finalist if they stay healthy.
I agree there. So we jump from North now to Port Adelaide, which I'm fascinated. It's the Port Adelaide team that I think they've kind of been under talked about because they didn't do a ton. Yes, they bring in Ashley Saint. I think is fantastic for them, but ins and outs that I think they lost. I think some of their losses I think are going to hurt them a little. Are going to hurt them a little bit because it took away some of the depth that they had. But some of the additions and the priority signing, I think they bring good depth in other places. So it'd be fascinating. Your thoughts on their ins and outs?
Sarah Goodwin, definitely in terms of talent, is a loss. Very talented halfback, although she only averaged 7.6 disposals. I'm not that sure how much of a fight Port Adelaide put up to retain her. I think they felt she was talented but replaceable. Kate Sermon's a bit of a loss, but again, her output last year wasn't what they would have liked. Talent-wise, it's a loss, but the output probably wasn't what they would have liked or what she would have liked. Jackie Yorston's a loss to the inactive list. Her tough tackling in the middle, average 8 tackles per game, among the top few in the competition. Janelle Cuthbertson's probably not quite the Janelle Cuthbertson we saw 3 years ago, but is still a handy player and, still going to be, if nothing else, a real leader down back and kind of give a very young team some guidance. Ash Woodland, superb pickup. Or Ash Saint, I should say. Me Woodland, superb pickup. Like they've struggled to hit struggled to score last year. She is a one-woman crusade to fix scoring problems. She knows where the goals are.
It'll be well. I think a little bit of their struggles last year was Gemma Houghton had some injuries too, and she was kind of there. And it doesn't help that Aaron. Oh my gosh! Holy shnikes! Yeah, Aaron Phillips.
The name Aaron Phillips?
I know it's on my. I just had a total and utter brain fade on this podcast. What the heck? Aaron Phillips she did not have she got tagged a little bit last year. She just could not find the goals this year. I think Ash Saint actually releases a little bit of pressure
Yeah.
from both of those two, and I think actually will really make them dangerous if they're all clicking. And with a young midfield that can give them great service, this is a team on their day could be quite scary if they can get going.
Yeah, well, Gemma Houghton last year, don't forget, she only played 3 full games. She played 4 games,
Mhm.
went off injured in round 2. She played 3 full games for the season. Like, that's getting her back is not insignificant. She was a star at the Dockers when they were really up and running in around 2020. Jasmine Stewart's a handy pickup as well, coming back from retirement. She's still only 24, so she'll probably help cover that hole created by Yorston being inactive. And we'll also ease the burden on their midfield. You look at Abby Dowrick, you look at Hannah Ewings, like those two. That is going to be a special 1-2 punch in the middle for 15 years.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And so just someone there to help ease that burden on them, especially defensively. And you'll really allow Hannah Ewings to get out of the midfield and hit up her teammates inside the forward 50. And then there's a lot of buzz about Matilda Scholes as well. Young ruck, out of the SANFLW. There's a lot of buzz about her.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of talk that she is a seriously good footballer. She has terrific size from all accounts. And they were desperate for some ruck coverage last year, especially in the second half of the year. It was starting to show.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's going to be, especially in the second half of the season, she's going to be a really good pickup for them, I reckon. And I think I probably would dispute you a bit. I think they've actually progressed quite a lot, especially because they've picked up players where they need them. And they haven't lost as much as they've lost talent.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't lost as much by way of output, probably other than Yorston as a defensive midfielder.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be arguing that Jasmine Stewart is a reasonable facsimile of that. And then when you bring in both Janelle Cuthbertson and Jasmine Simmons, their back line is bolstered a lot as well, especially in terms of size and being able to handle those bigger key forwards. Anya McDonough, for example, against when they played the Hawks last year, was dominant. She was just completely controlling the air, moving up and down the ground. And that was because they didn't have any real presence as a key back. They now have 2 solid key defenders. Again, Ash Saint single-handedly can solve scoring problems. She hits the scoreboard like no one else last calendar year in the competition. I still think they've got a way to go in terms of their development. But if I'm a Port Adelaide fan, I'm really excited at how some of this young talent is going. And I'm actually really happy with the targeted recruitment, picking up players where they need them to be.
Mm-hmm. So my question for them is with not a bad season for a first year club, are they set a little bit to regress this year just because you're going to have some growing pains and a little bit tougher draw this year?
They do have a tougher draw. They actually play they're one of only a few teams who play 3 of the 4 preliminary finalists from last year. Mm-hmm. They don't play Melbourne, so that's if you can avoid Melbourne, that's always a good start. Having said that, they do also in their last 6 games only play 1 finals team, which is North Melbourne and Middle East. They'll lose that one. So their draw does actually rank 14th by opponent plus minus. So I do think they'll win. I think they'll win more than 1.5 games. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they'll regress because I think they've actually recruited smartly. But the only thing that might lead them to regressing is they do have a tough start to the season. There's a showdown in round 1, then they play Brisbane, then they play the Cats in round 4. They've got 3 finals teams in the first 4 weeks, including a preliminary finalist and a grand finalist. Mm-hmm. I wonder if heads start dropping a little bit. And this is actually where I think Janelle Cuthbertson might be even more handy, and Aaron Phillips, like the likes of those older heads. Mm-hmm. They might actually be more useful in keeping heads up and minds in the right place in the locker room than on the field at times. Mm-hmm. Like losing, because their start to the season is really difficult, but then they only have 1 finals team after round 4. Yeah. So I'll be curious to see how the order of their fixture impacts their performance in the second half of the season. But again, I think there's a lot of talent there. And in 2 years, Hannah Ewings will be that player. Like, you'll refuse to count a team with Hannah Ewings in it out of making the finals just because it's Hannah Ewings.
Yeah,
like the talent in their midfield, especially, is ridiculous.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we'll move on from Port Adelaide over to Richmond, the darlings of last season with their nice little win streak, the hot streak, I think was what they mentioned it. This is a Richmond team that I have been high on for 2 seasons. I was high on them going into last year, saying I think they were the team that could slip into the finals that nobody was expecting. And again, I'm not patting myself on the back, but it was pretty cool to get that call right. So we look at Richmond, a Richmond team. It's fascinating again, kind of ins and outs. Not, it's some interesting ins that I think are going to be great additions for this team here. Really quick, your thoughts on the ins and outs for Richmond?
Courtney Wakefield is really the big out for the most of the other players they've traded out or delisted were seeking opportunity. Like, Branko Casino and Jacques, they were both struggling for opportunity. Like, they, as much as anything, left to get more regular game time. So they've really only lost one player from what I'd call their starting 21.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an all Australian forward. Like, that's not an insignificant piece they've lost.
Mm-hmm.
But they've only lost Caitlin Grice is a really handy addition to the forward line. Hasn't quite had the output that she would have liked in a few years, but she's still a superb footballer. Charlie Ryan, talented tall midfielder, still only 19. She slid in the draft because of her injury.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, she's a 19-year-old tall midfielder with all the talent in the world. That doesn't grow on trees. That's a real asset to have. So bringing her back in is going to be a really handy piece. I think bringing in Courtney Jones as well, just, that ball user at half forward. If you can get the ball into your forward line, especially with Caitlin Greiser, who probably struggled due to the limited quality of service from St Kilda as well, not to denigrate them, but the quality of ball coming into the St Kilda forward line wasn't great at times. And Moorabbin plays a factor in that as well with the howling wins. But I think Courtney Jones might be a really handy pickup as well across half forward. But and then I think, and even looking at their draft pick, Shelby Knoll, pick 24 late in the draft, real slider. Just another tall forward. It doesn't turn 23 till late in the season. Just a bit more depth there. So, I mean, you look around, they've got a really talented list. They've got a couple of really strong players on every line. They've got Ellie McKenzie in the midfield. Ailish Sheeran's an Australian halfback. Libby Graham's the anchor of that back line as a key defender. Mon Conti, we don't need to talk about. And then you just look at their forward line as well. Their forward line is probably their biggest question, but that's where, well, other than Katie Brennan, whether she actually can get on the park with regularity, because her foot injuries are a real concern.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Caitlin Grice is only going to benefit their other forwards as well. So I do think they'll make finals. I'll put that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Their draw is more difficult this year. Again, it ranks 7th. For difficulty based on last year's opponent plus minus.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think they're a strong team. Like, they'll be around the mark. I think they'll be the bottom half of the 8. But if Katie Brennan stays fit, they would need a lot to go right, but could be an outside chance at pushing for the top 4 if Katie Brennan stays fit, which admittedly and unfortunately is a big if.
Yep. So it's kind of a perfect lead into my question is, will they have issues making finals with the tougher draw this year after, like I said, kind of benefiting a little bit from a lighter draw last year?
It'll certainly be a challenge for them. I still think, I think we'll know a lot about them after round 2. They could be 0-2, but if they've had close losses to Brisbane and Adelaide, that's who they play in the first 2 weeks. Then we might say, okay, we know there's something here. If they get absolutely belted, then we're going to learn a lot about them in round 3 when they play the Giants. So it's going to be Richmond will know. I think we'll know how Richmond are going to go pretty early in the season, even though they got a difficult start, because they play those 2 preliminary finalists, last year's losing grand finals and the Crows, and then they don't play another finals team until round 9. So their season is bookended by tough games. But then they got 6 games in the middle of the year where they don't play a single team that made finals last year. So they've probably got to go 5-1 in that window, you would think, make finals. So I still think they will make finals. And again, not quite the level of variance of Fremantle, but probably not far off it in terms of, especially because we assume teams remain healthy for the most part. I think there's a legitimate argument with a couple of Richmond's players. Katie Brennan, unfortunately, is a star and a phenomenal human being from all accounts. There's a legitimate argument to say you can assume she'll miss games through injury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, it's the plight, unfortunately. But if she can stay healthy and stay on the park, she makes Richmond very,
Yep.
very dangerous. So we jump over to, I think, the team that has the biggest facelift of the entire offseason. That is St. Kilda. I mean, it's insane. Their losses. There's some really good players. I mean, Tarni White, Kate Sheeler, Caitlin Greiser, Clara Fitzpatrick, Lucy Burke, Jess Martin, and Jade Van Dyke, all off, 4 traded in some of those massive trades. But you have to say, Jess Wardlaw, Steph Kiochi, Jamie Lambert, Serene Watson, they move out 4, but they bring in 4 really good, some really and talented players and some experience that this young Saints team needs. It's a facelift. So, I mean, I kind of really quickly went through the really quickly. So we'll jump to the question. Will a revamped roster see the Saints move up the ladder this season?
St Kilda to me are probably the hardest team to read going into the season because with Collingwood they've had a lot of turnover as well. We at least know that how Bree Davey and Britt Bonici fit into that team. Like we need to see Nat Plain, Jesse Wardlaw, Steph Chiocci, Jamie Lambert, Serene Watson. We need to see how they all fit together
Mm-hmm.
on the park. We've seen what Bree Davey and Britt Bonici look like. Spoiler alert, really good. It is going to be. There's a lot of question marks. Wardlaw, a bit more of a seamless fit because she can just take the Kate Sheeler role. But it's going to be an interesting one. I genuinely don't know how they're going to go. Like they are, to me, the hardest team in this competition to read. I think they're going to be a lot better in the second half of the season than they are in the first. Just once they've all had a chance to play together and gel a bit. Jade Van Dyke, I think, is an underrated loss. I remember watching her play at Hawthorn in the VFLW before she got drafted, and she was a rising star. She was a jet there back in that 2018 VFLW Premiership. I remember being at that game. Maddie Boyd as well. I don't know how much she'll play, but she's a really handy pickup. Her contested marking was second to none in the VFLW this year, playing for Box Hill. You probably saw some of the coverage we were giving on Soaring to New Heights of Box Hill VFLW. Maddie Boyd was just electric.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Saints, they've got talent. Tanya Smith as well. She'll be a handy addition to the midfield. She didn't play much last year. She came back late in the season. She might be. She doesn't show up as an in or out because she was on the active list last season, but only played a couple of games. Although, the fact that she's there is going to make a difference. She's going to actually be able to play a full season.
Mm-hmm.
Georgie Patrikios as well as the other one. I think she'll be. I think at the end of last season, I think the general consensus was better for the run, having not played in a really long time. And there were a few weeks at the start of the season where no knock on her, you could tell.
Mm-hmm.
I think she'll be a lot better for her rust level being the same as everyone else's at the start of the season. I mean, look, she's an All-Australian. She's been an absolute star of the competition since she came in. I think overall they'll be better because they only beat expansion teams last year. I think overall they'll be better. Whether their win total reflects that because of the way they start the season, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're one of those ones I have massive question marks because will the facelift change how things are going? So we jump to it. I hope you don't mind. Can I kind of take over the podcast a little bit because we go to my beloved Sydney Swans, and I gotta say this off season. I look at your worksheet that you sent me. The losses. I mean, mostly delistings, 4 delistings. Unfortunately, Sarah Dargan, Sarah Skinner, Tane Kavanaugh, and Genevieve Lawson, Tavin, along with Zoe Hurl. But what they brought in the PSP and the trade period absolutely has me licking my chops, excited as Chloe Malloy, Lucy McAvoy, Laura Gardner all join the Swans, along with 4 Irish players who I think, talking with Mike, I think are going to be fantastic additions with Paris McCarthy, a quick forward, Jenny Higgins, a super talented, experienced midfielder, Julie O'Sullivan, who can go mid or go defender, young but super talented, and Tanya Kennedy, a tough, gritty inside mid that'll be fascinating to watch. This is a Swans team that I talk with several other Swans fans. They're super excited. I think this team has progressed in leaps and bounds. I have a feeling, and I'm gonna touch wood that I don't jinx them this year. I think they get their first win, and I don't think it's the only one. I think they get 2 or 3 wins this year. I think they spoil a few teams this season. They could be super, super competitive, which goes to my question that I had. Your thoughts on this, Liam? I think the Swans win more than just one. I think they're a 2 or 3 win season with the revamped roster that they had because they're going to sneak up on teams because the talent that they brought in, I think, will change games this year.
Yeah, I would have agreed with you much more forcefully 24 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
Before, and at the time of recording, we're recording this on the 17th of August, Australian time and US time, just different times of day. We found out today that Montana Ham is probably going to miss most of the season with a foot injury,
Mm-hmm.
which is just horrendous. She is an incredible player. Again, really big midfielder, and with her big midfielders with her talent don't grow on trees.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do think the Swans win a game, 100%. I'm just looking at their draw and I'm like, where do multiple wins come from? And it probably comes from a bit of luck on game day and just a couple of things going right here and there, and probably during the middle of the season. Because I look, they get 4 weeks in a row from rounds 4 to 7 where they play a team that didn't make the finals. They play the Dockers in round 10. Their last 3 games are pretty difficult, especially if the Dockers are at the high end of where they could be. They play the Giants round 1, and then they've got a couple of tough games in the Cats and the Lions. So round 4 to 7 is really where I'm looking if I'm a Swans fan. That's where you got to be targeting for your first win. At risk of sounding like a really negative Hawks fan, round 7 at the Henson Health Hazard, which had better have undergone renovations, AFL, if you're going to subject the players to what you put them through again last year. I'm turning up in a hazmat suit just to prove a point.
Mm-hmm.
That's a game I'd be targeting if I'm the Swans. I mean, you get up for every game and go out there to try and win it, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But another expansion team, yes, who have recruited very well. But if you're the Swans, you're saying we lost this team by less than a kick last year. Let's see what we can do at our home ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's going to be an interesting one for the Swans. I do think they get a win at some point. I frankly think Chloe Malloy is too good to play in a team that doesn't win a game.
Mm-hmm.
But they've recruited well. Alice Mitchell coming back from being inactive as well will help bolster that back line.
Mm-hmm.
And then Montana Beraldson, I'm trying to pronounce. There's a lot of. I've probably butchered about 10 names tonight.
It happens.
24-year-old outside midfielder, great runner. Will be a really handy addition as well, given the Swans need a bit of run outside the likes of Lauren Zaghetti.
Mm-hmm.
And so she'll be able to do that. She was a very high level 100 and 400 meter runner as a junior. So having a bit of athleticism around the ball is only going to help you. Laura Gardner was always on the fringes at the Cats, massive accumulator at VFLW level. She'll be happy to get a role as a mid-half forward. Wouldn't be shocked if she was actually in a rotation with Malloy, one on the ball, one at half forward, to be honest. But I think there's a lot of smart recruiting at the Swans. And they were probably the team that struggled the most to prepare as well for last season, just given that they're in the small, it's the biggest city. It's okay, not now.
Second biggest city now.
Yeah, they're in a small footy market.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take, it can be quite difficult to get players up there. Getting Montana Ham up there was a magnificent piece of work on the Swans' part. But it's just going to take some time to gel it all together. I do think they win at least one game this year. I think they need a fair bit to go right to win more than 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. It'll be tough. You still have some tough games that I think they'll struggle in, but I think GWS early in the year, I think perfect timing to get them early in the season before they've kind of gotten into it. I think that first game at North Sydney Oval, I think is going to be a cracker Sydney Derby. So let's jump out west to the West Coast Eagles, a team that I think you saw a facelift with them last year. And I think they played much more competitive footy than I think a lot of people expected. I think some expected them to be down with the expansion teams, but they played quite a good round of footy. So we look at their kind of ins and outs again. Amy Franklin getting picked up from the Fremantle Dockers, I think was a great piece of work. They get some inactive players back that I think will add some depth and experience to them. This is an Eagles team I think could be quite the interesting team this year because I think they got better and for the most part, I really think they only progressed. They didn't really lose much. That mostly only delistings from their lineup. So I think this is a much better West Coast team. I think some people are giving them credit for. So I'll quickly go to my question here. Will the Eagles continue to progress after a better season than I think a lot of people expected from last year?
Yeah, they're going to progress because the only players they've lost are ones they delisted. They've lost 4 players all through delisting.
Mhm.
Amy Franklin, they'd be thrilled to get her in as a key forward. Like she might need another year or two just to consolidate a bit, but she is a super talent. And then Evie Gooch comes back, bolsters the back line. Sinead Davidson comes back, works up the ground, links the play as a forward. And then Lauren Wackfer. Gemma
Mhm.
Bastiani on the West Coast season preview was really high on her and with good reason. She's an absolute star. She was the second WA draft pick in her draft pool,
Mhm.
despite the fact that she was known to be inactive when she was drafted. She was
Torn
drafted.
ACL. Yep.
She was drafted on crutches with a torn ACL, knowing she'd miss the season, and she was the second pick in the WA pool.
Mhm.
She is a serious talent as a ruck forward. Most people would have had her penciled in as the number one ruck when she came across. Sarah LeKay has kind of done what Lucy Wales did to Tamara Luke at the Hawks and said, no, thank you. That number one ruck role is mine. You're not getting it back.
Mhm.
So Wakfa has played forward with success as a junior, so she might have to play there. I just look at their midfield again. Emma Swanson, Aisling McCarthy, and Bella Lewis. It's a really, really strong midfield, and especially with Sarah LeKay being as good a tap ruck as she is to just feed them service. Um, a lot would have to go right for them to make finals or even pretend to contend.
Mhm.
But they had 14 players. They had nearly half a list turnover last year. 14 players turned over from season six
Mhm.
to seven. This year it's 4, and it's 3 players returning from inactive to replace 4 delistings, and then with Amy Franklin coming in to just kind of supplement it all. Just I look at this team, they'll be better. This season is going to be about consolidation, and then seeing where they can go in season 9 and beyond.
It'll be very interesting. Again, the West Coast is one of those teams I look at. And I'm fascinated to see how they go because again, I think that they really didn't regress at all when it comes to the list changes. So will the player progression go with how I think things go? So last but not least, 18th and final team that we need to discuss, Western Bulldogs, which I think a team made the finals, scrappy, still rather young bunch. Yes, they've got super talented, experienced players like Ellie Blackburn, but I look at this Doggies team and I go, again, I think finals is a possibility. You look at it, I don't think they really took a lot of hits. Nell Morris Dalton is a little bit of a loss, but in the long run, they have a retiring into delistings for their other 2 losses. So I think in the long run, they are not too bad. Again, what they brought in, not exactly screams off the page. So I think with one of those where gains positives, this isn't a huge amount to discuss. Here's a huge amount to discuss here. So we'll jump to question for them is can this young doggies team is still relatively young again make finals and then progress further this year, maybe even to a semifinal, maybe even sneak in and surprise somebody and get into a preliminary.
I struggle to see them making a prelim, but I refuse to count out Ellie Blackburn. She's just so good at football. I look at their outs. Nell Morris Dalton only played 5 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
Brooke Vanon, who retired, didn't get a game, and the other 2 were delisted. Dom Carruthers is a handy pickup. Aurora Smith returning from inactive, I think, is a really, really big thing, and hasn't got much attention. But she's a speedy outside midfielder who uses the ball well, supreme talent. She's only played 1 AFLW game due to her injury, but she doesn't turn 20 until December. Like she is a super player. I watched the Dogs a bit in the match sim where they played against my Hawks over last weekend, and Ellie Blackburn wasn't deployed in the midfield much. They were clearly trying a few things, but they looked really sharp. At other times, you could tell it was their first game back, which is fine because it was their first game back.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the Dogs make finals again this year. They play 3 preliminary finalists, which is difficult. They play Melbourne and then the 2 losing prelim finalists in Adelaide and North Melbourne. Although they only play one other finals team, that being Geelong in round 1. They play 6 teams who didn't make the finals last year. I think they're going to be I think they will make the finals. I don't. How can you can out a team with Ellie Blackburn?
Mm-hmm. 100% agree. I mean, she is a match winner for that. So that is all 18 teams covered. So we'll jump to it. What I kind of call tips of the year. We're going to go over this. I hate doing the huge ones like the best and fairest. So I'm going to kind of do a little bit of categories. We'll also cover who we think make finals and who we think will be raising the flag at the end of the year. So ask this really quickly, Liam, your thoughts. What is your story of the year are you looking at for this season?
I think I said earlier, Melbourne go undefeated. That to
Okay.
me is the story I'm looking at for this year. I think that's I genuinely think they could go unbeaten.
Hmm.
And the Swans getting their first win as well. I think that'll be a big story. Just to that way, every team in the competition has now heard their song after the game.
Exactly. For me, my story of the my story of the year is the I want to see how the expansion teams do. Can we see progressions? Can we see more wins? Again, as you said, Sydney getting a win. Can Essendon peak into finals? Can Port Adelaide creep up the ladder? Can Hawthorn use their PSP signings to jump up the ladder and maybe put a little bit of scare into some of the previous teams? So my story is how do the expansion teams go and how's the competitiveness? Because I think the skill will be better this season. Who in this is team wise, who do you think is going to be your biggest improver? Who's going to be the team that jumps up the ladder the most?
I think Fremantle just because they're actually going to have fit players.
See, for me, I think it's West Coast. I think West Coast progressed a lot with not having the turnover change they have. They'll have another full season. I think Amy Franklin's an addition. I think it's West Coast because part of me wanted to go North, but North I don't really think has a lot of room to progress unless they get to a
Yeah,
grand final this year. Saints have that facelift, so we'll have to see how it goes. So I think it's West Coast. I agree with you. I think both the West teams, I think both the Perth teams, I think are potential in that. Who's your biggest disappointment? I'll go first. I think it's going to be Carlton. Again, their list is so good. I just think new coach, they're going to go through some headaches. I think some of the losses that they took, as much as I absolutely love Darcy Vesio seeing them play well, just think Carlton's going to be. I think Carlton's going to be a bottom four side this year, and I hate saying that. Sorry, Carlton fans.
I completely agree. I think Carlton are really not going to be that good this year. I said earlier, I don't know if they'll win the wooden spoon simply because they've got by quite a not insignificant margin the easiest draw in the competition.
Mhm,
Like I look at their draw, net -1, -517 is their opponent plus minus collectively across from last season.
mhm,
The next easiest draw is West Coast with -356. Like that is a massive gap in terms of the easiest draw in the competition.
mhm,
But I can't see Carlton winning more than a couple of games. I think they're really going to struggle, and they've got some talent. But last year they were not that impressive. They've lost some more players this year. Lucy McAvoy's a huge out.
mhm.
It's just hard for me to see where they're going to get many wins, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And unfortunately, and again, I hate going there, but so we'll jump from that to player to watch this year. I'm not going to say best and fairest. Who's the player that may not be on the Hawthorn team that you're going to keep an eye on this year because you think could have a really good season?
I'm going to give you two players. I'm going to give you Nina Morrison.
Hmm.
I mentioned how much of a fan I am of her game earlier. She's terrific to watch. She could have a real. She was kind of starting to in the second half of last season have a breakout. I think she might really soar to new heights to plug my podcast again this season. And then I'm also going to mention Mackenzie Eadley at Hawthorn as well.
Hmm.
I think she's a player who you might really see kicking on this year. Hopefully, she gets a full season. She had multiple injuries getting her way last year, but a 6 foot tall key defender who could launch the ball into Port Phillip Bay from 50 metres out at Frankston.
Hmm.
I think she'll be really fun for people to watch as well.
All right, my player to watch because I'm hoping if she can get her body right, I think she can finally show why she was the number one overall pick, and that is Ellie McKenzie from the Richmond Tigers. I think everybody talks Mon Conti, everybody talks Grace Egan because she's a defensive stomper, and I think it's been one of those. She's had that little injury, she's had her injury issues, but I think Ellie McKenzie is set for an absolute breakout season this year. She's going to be one of those I keep an eye on because she could help this Richmond side really, really progress with some of the additions this year. So, as per usual, I got to tip the Ellie McKenzie on that one. So, all right, we've kind of discussed this really quickly. Who are your teams? Who are your 8 teams that you are going to see competing for a flag in the finals this year?
I honestly think it might be the same 8 that competed last year. I can't see the top 4 changing. It might change in order. I can't see Melbourne getting knocked off top spot. I'm then going to go. You can throw a blanket over North Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane. I think the Dogs, the draw's easy enough to get them in there. The Tigers are arguably more talented, but equally really vulnerable. Them and Collingwood, just with their sheer difficulty of their draw, are vulnerable, but I still think they get there. I think the Cats, their draw is easy enough that they'll get there. And then I think the two other teams that are really going to be battling to get into the 8, and I think there's a little bit of a 10, the Suns, and then that lot who wear red and black at Windy Hill.
I knew I was going to go there. I'm with you. I sat there and I thought about this for a little. Thought about this for a few days when I was getting the script together, and I agree with you. I think the 8 that made last year make it. I think Essendon is really the only team outside of this 8 that I think can make it. I think they've got the talent. It's who drops out? Is it Richmond or is it Geelong? I think are the two teams that I think could be those teams that could potentially drop out and see Essendon step in. I think Collingwood, Bree Davy, Britt Benici, I think instantly makes them a very, very, I think they potentially could sneak into top 4 if say a North, an Adelaide, or a Brizzy have injury issues. So Collingwood, I think, is that team that would jump into the top 4. But right now, I would say that the 8 stay the same with Essendon just missing, but I think they're right there. So I think we've both already said it earlier. Your Premier, Melbourne, I take it.
Geelong's draw is too easy to miss the finals. Geelong's draw is too easy to miss the finals.
Yeah. So alrighty, Premier, Melbourne.
Yeah, that's easy.
All righty. Hey, let's end this episode. Let's end this episode. I know we've talked a lot, but do you mind? Do you want to tip round 1 real quick?
Let's go.
All righty, we go to it. Round 1. I'll pull it up right here. First game, Icon Park, Melbourne v Collingwood. It'd be interesting. Melbourne's home ground this year will be Icon Park. Melbourne Demons get to raise their flag. Do they start off season 1 with a win over Collingwood?
Given that I've tipped them to go undefeated, I'm going to say yes.
All right, I'm with you too. I think Melbourne win it, but I think Collingwood give them a test. I think Bree Davy, Britt Benici might be a little bit rusty, and I think they capitalize on it a little bit. But I think this is a cracking first game of the year. Carlton host the Gold Coast Suns at Icon Park. I have the Suns in this one. I think Carlton's going to struggle this season. I think they're going to have a little bit of issues there. So I have the Suns going to on the road and getting a nice win to start the season.
Gold Coast, and there's a real chance this isn't close.
Yeah, very true. All right. Norwood Oval sees the showdown between Adelaide and Port Adelaide. I have the Crows in this one. I think Port will be in it, but I think the Crows just too strong.
Yeah, Adelaide.
All right. Geelong v the Western Bulldogs at GMHBA Stadium. Who do you like in this one?
This is the other contender for me for game of the round. I am going to go with the Cats at home, although I think I'm going to be on my way to Frankston during that game. That might be a game that I watch at the airport on my way to fly back to Canberra the next morning, or get up at 4 in the morning to replay before I go to the airport. That game is going to be that game. If you're at home, make sure you're parked in front of the telly for that one, and then the one after it as well. Like, that's going to be a really fun game to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I got Geelong in that one. Alrighty. Hawthorn versus Essendon. Still no location as of yet. Who do you like in this one?
It's at Connect Stadium in Frankston.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right. My app hasn't updated, I guess.
Yeah. I hate saying it. The Hawks aren't winning this.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think Bombers on this one, but I think it's a close one. Bluntstone Arena in Tassie, North Melbourne v St Kilda. I like the Roos in this one.
Yeah, I agree. North Melbourne will win this. And as much as anything, I think St Kilda, again, they'll be better in the second half of the season than the first half of the season. If you're going to get the Saints, you get them in the first couple of weeks, you're happy. And I think North Melbourne will beat them anytime anyway.
Yeah, I agree. North Sydney Oval, Sydney v GWS. And GWS, who do you like in this one?
I think this one's almost the hardest to tip. I have to say the Giants, just because I've seen them do a bit more. The Swans team's had a fair bit of turnover. I just think the Giants will get there. They're probably very happy that their first game without Breed Stack and Cora Staunton is against the Swans. But I'm going to say the Giants, and it's probably the game I'm tipping with the least confidence.
I'm going to tip Sydney in this one. I just think this is the great time to catch them. First game of the season. They're missing how's going to be the connection. I think this young team has got some great ones. I'm going to go for the upset here. I think North Sydney Oval, finally, Sydney get off the schneid. Maybe it's a little bit of Homer Donnie here, but I'm going to tip Sydney in this one. Up to Brighton Homes Arena up in Springfield as Brisbane hosts the Richmond Tigers. I like the Lions in this one as much as I'd love to take the Tigers. I think Brisbane a little too much depth. I think the Tigers are in this. I think this comes down late, but I think the Lions just too good at home.
Yeah, Brisbane have that much talent. Like it's as lost the amount of talent they've got is still just ridiculous. So
Mhm.
it's Brisbane for me.
All right. And last but not least, Fremantle Oval sees Freo v the West Coast Eagles. Who do you like in this one?
This is another really tough one to pick. It was this one and the Sydney Derby, the
Two derbies.
two local rivalries. Those two are really hard to pick. I am with absolutely no confidence going to say the Dockers. I just think they've proven a little bit more if they've got if and this is assuming they get a lot of players back as well. If the Dockers are the same state they were in last year, then this West Coast team with some of the talent they're bringing back off the inactive list will probably win.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Fremantle are getting enough players back, and they showed flashes last year that they still have enough talent to beat a West Coast team who are going to be mainly focused on consolidation in the early parts of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I got Fremantle in this one, but I think this is again razor thin margin on that. So I know we've been on for a while, but a lot to talk about when it comes to it. We need to give the women their due. So, Liam, again, thank you so much for hopping on again. If you get a chance and you're a huge Hawks fan or just love women's footy, Soaring to New Heights, a fantastic listen. They talk with players, they discuss all the games, they even cover the VFLW, which I've been loving keeping track on that. So, Liam, keep up the great work, sir. And again, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today.
Thanks, Donny. Always happy to chat about the W with you, sir. Anytime.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, keep an eye out, more coverage, AFL, the state leagues, and of course, AFLW still to come. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you again very, very soon.